Welcome to From Rome Info Video. My name is Brother Alexis Spagnola and the publisher of FromRome.info, an electronic journal for news and commentary about the Catholic Church, Rome, Italy, and the Vatican. My video today is going to be very interesting for all you Catholics out there. It is entitled, Are Catholics Required to Accept Cardinal Prevost as Leo XIV? And I just published this article from Rome. You can go, I'll put a link in the show notes if you want the written text. And this is a discussion about your rights in the Catholic Church and why you have the right to question the validity of the papal election. And what I'm about to say is true about any papal election, but most lay people don't know this, and they succumb to being manipulated by clergy who are not interested in the truth, just interested in spiritually abusing you. So if you don't want to be spiritually abused the next 10, 20 years, listen to what I have to say here. 5 years ago, I wrote to a cardinal about the invalidity of the election of Jorge Mary Bergoglio in the conclave of 2013, and he wrote back to me claiming that as Catholics we must presume the election was valid and that Pope Francis had received the office of Pope from Christ. I responded to the cardinal then in an open letter entitled Dialogue with a Cardinal Who Didn't Want to Dialogue, and I published that on January 23rd, 2020, a copy of which I mailed to him. He never replied. Since the issue is timely, however, I will reformulate my question and reply to it based on present circumstances of June of 2025, since we just saw the conclave of May 7th and 8th, which allegedly elected Cardinal Robert Francis Prevost as Pope Leo XIV. So the question is, must a Catholic presume Pope Leo XIV is a validly elected pope who actually holds the papal office? And I respond, no. And I will give you two reasons, each of which I will explain in detail, so that anyone, even without any training in Latin or ecclesiastic law, can understand. So pay attention, because you can use these arguments, these explanations, when talking about this, whenever you raise a topic. Must a Catholic presume Pope Leo XIV is a validly elected pope? I say no, first, because that a man is the Pope is not a presumption of fact, but the conclusion of law. And this is a very important principle. For example, he is not the Pope whom the cardinals say is the Pope. Rather, he is the Pope who was validly elected by the cardinals according to the norm of the papal law of John Paul II on conclaves, on the electing a Pope, called Universi Dominici Gregis. To say the first, namely that he whom the cardinals say is the Pope, confuses the means whereby we know a canonical fact, a legal fact in church law, with the cause of the legitimacy of the canonical fact. These are two different things. Yes, we know under normal circumstances who was elected by the cardinals from the cardinals themselves. That is the normal channel for knowing the canonical fact of the election. But the canonical fact of the election is not the canonical validity of the election. The canonical fact is the witness that the event took place. Period. The legitimacy of the election is much more important, just as the truth of any claim is more important than the fact the claim was made. And I'll give you this example that everyone can understand. Otherwise, if anyone came to your front door at your home and knocked, and when you opened it claimed to be the owner of your house, his mere fact of having claimed it would make him the owner. Now, just as this principle holds, no matter who is at the front door, whether it be a nobody, the town clerk, the assessor's office superintendent, the mayor, or the governor, so also in a papal election. Thus, the truth of the claim is based on the conformity of facts with the prescriptions of the law governing ownership, as in the case of a house or of the election of a pope. The truth of the claim is not based on the dignity of those claiming it. And this is a very, very important principle. So the mere fact that the cardinals claim something doesn't mean it's true. So the Catholic who can read papal law and who has knowledge of historical facts can assess the validity of the claim made by the cardinals. If he can do this, it would be a mortal sin of sloth if he presumed the claim was true when, upon hearing a contrary claim, based on the factually demonstrated discrepancy of behavior with the requirements of law, he presumed Leo XIV was the Pope. Okay, so we're talking about your rights in the matter of knowing something happened in the church, okay? So yes, an ignorant Catholic can presume that if the cardinals say X is the Pope, that X is the Pope. But a literate Catholic, in the age of social media, who has access to nearly all information, cannot presume when he encounters a Catholic or anyone else that tells him there is something wrong with the election, that puts it in doubt. That is, after the first moment in which he encounters any report that puts in doubt the validity of the election. And here is the difficulty most Catholics have. They believe that they must wait for certain evidence that the cardinals are not worthy of trust. That is, they refuse to read the law or compare the requirements of the law with the facts of what happened, because they are instead waiting for the testimony of some cardinal that disputes the claim of other cardinals. And they infer from the unanimity of the cardinals' claim to the validity of the election, regardless of what the law says. Now, I can understand this approach because, being half Sicilian, I know how many deal with organized crime. They simply do not admit it exists, so that they can go about their daily lives without any worries. They might pity the victims of the Sicilian mafia, but they really don't care about that until one of their loved ones becomes a victim. So the next time anyone, especially a priest, tells you to shut up or be quiet, or that you are a sinner or bad Catholic for not presuming Leo XIV is the Pope, and or for sharing the truth about the election so that others might be liberated from the deception, ask your interlocutor if they are preaching out of their personal presumption born of sloth. My second point now. Must we presume that Leo XIV is a validly elected Pope? And this second one has more to do with your rights. No, because if you have the responsibility to act on the basis of another's claim, you are liable if you act on presumption alone. Now, every Catholic who has ever been in a position of responsibility understands this, because the mere fact that you hold authority does not exculpate you from responsibility. Nay, it increases it. This is why in all official matters of state, every government official is required to act only if the proper verifiable and verified actions or documents are communicated. The same is true for every Catholic. For if we are to accept the magisterium of someone claiming to be the vicar of Jesus Christ, we would be grossly negligent and responsible for the harm to everyone around us if we propagate his teachings, having presumed his election was valid, and remained in our presumption even when other Catholics have shared with us information about the possible invalidity of his claim to the papacy. Remember, we are not dealing here with a controversy over whether the local ice cream shop uses cream or milk to make their products. We are dealing with our eternal salvation and the salvation of all those around us who heed our advice and counsel, whether we be parents, friends, colleagues, or relatives. Moreover, if you are a priest, pastor, confessor, or spiritual director, or ecclesiastic superior. Thus, it is both deeply irresponsible and gravely reckless for anyone in such a position to accord to a man claiming to be the Roman pontiff the presumption that he is the Roman pontiff, as soon as anyone whomsoever says there's a problem in his election. All Catholics of all ages before our own understood this, which is why there have been named more than 40 anti-popes in the history of the Church. How did they earn the moniker of anti-pope? Except by the fact that some Catholics contested the validity of his claim to power. Those who refuse to hear any such contestation or disagreement about whether a man be the Pope or not, and who hold responsibility over others, are thus showing themselves to be incompetent in the execution of their duties. And this truth is reflected in Canon 41 of the Code of Canon Law of 1983, published by John Paul II, which holds that anyone who is required to execute an administrative order who has not verified that the one issuing it has authority and that the act itself is legitimate acts invalidly. That is, posits an act which he has no authority to make, usurping the rights of the one who legitimately could authorize the act, and defrauding all those subjects who have the right to not be deceived in a matter regarding the claim that a superior has asked something of them. Thus, priests, especially, have the duty to investigate all reasonable claims that a papal election is irregular or invalid. Otherwise, they are sinning gravely in the execution of their ministry. Likewise are all those who have been entrusted or who have taken up by their own volition the dissemination of information about the Catholic Church, if they censor any discussion or reports about the irregularity in a papal election. And in all these cases, we are not talking about a small sin, but a mortal sin. Because to spread information that someone is the Pope when he is not the Pope is to spiritually mislead or scandalize the faithful, and thus is a mortal sin multiplied by as many persons who might hear him say such things. Thus, if anyone tell you not to investigate or not to listen to such news of problems in a papal election, remind them that they are sinning gravely against justice and are attempting to violate your rights and duties under Canon 41. And so to such persons, a parent, for example, can reply, in private or in public, as follows: Father, as a parent who believes and holds to the Catholic faith, I have the grave duty, according to Canon 41, of verifying Prevost's claim to be Pope before I can offer him any obedience, reverence, or respect as the Pope. And your attempt to dissuade me of this grave duty is a grave sin against the charity and justice you owe me and my family. Moreover, since there is an objective evidence that his election was invalidated by the presence of 133 cardinal electors, in defiance of the papal law on conclaves, and that he spoke against the Catholic faith before his election, I must hold that it is more probable that his election is invalid because of the authority of Popes John Paul II and Paul IV, the text of whose constitutions are clear on these points, and which cannot be overturned by the interpretation of anyone but a true pope. And if the priest persists, add, and if you continue to abuse your position over me as a priest, I will file a charge of spiritual abuse against you. And that finishes my essay on whether a Catholic must presume that Leo XIV is the Pope. And I hope you found this article useful. I write many articles about this because at From Rome Info, I not only follow the news of the Church, I'm very interested and eager to inform Catholics what your rights are in the Church and how to resist and fight clerical corruption. Thank you for listening, and please share and like this video so more Catholics can get to know their rights, regardless of whether you think Leo XIV is the Pope or not, because this discourse I gave is about the rights every Catholic has. Thank you.